Greetings, people who are silently and patiently waiting for the drug to take effect. I put this video under the heading Stradella bass accordion because over the many years my studies would take me from the Stradella bass, the actual bass buttons, to the circle of fifths, and back and forth and back and forth. So I put this under this heading. You won't see an accordion today, but this came about because of my accordion, playing the accordion, okay? So, in previous videos, I talked about the circle of fifths. This is a very simple version here, circle of fifths, all right? And I showed how I came up with a theoretical idea of the perfect chord. Then I blew up a couple slices on the circle of fifth, and I showed you this diagram and how I came up with the idea of a subject, tone, or scale or chord. And then across from that, I have the aggregating tone, scale, or chord. All right, I showed you that in previous videos. You can review that if you want to. And I did it in different keys. Here's a tonal center of D. All right, we've already been through that. And you might have said, well, Joey, you showed us the circle of fifths, and that's all you got? That's all you found? Because you're the guy who finds things that other people don't find. And I say, well, no, I found more things, but you can't fault me too much, because I did mention in a previous video that the circle of fifth in publication, all right, showed up first in 1677. Nikolai Deletsky published a work called A Musical Grammar, all right, and that's when the world first saw an actual picture, a drawing of the circle of fifths, right? It wasn't as neat as this, but people kind of got the idea. And that was 342 years ago. That was, excuse me, 342 years ago. And I ask the question, well, in all those years, why hasn't anybody developed the circle or found stuff and brought out stuff and even talk about it? You can go on the internet and you'll see thousands of videos, but they almost all say the same thing. Now, there was one innovation I noticed which is somewhat useful. Somebody would take the circle of fifths. Let's say we blow up a segment, all right? We have 3 slices here, and here's your total center, and you would have F, C, G listed as your major chords. In other words, they're in this data ring. That's the major ring. Then here's your second data ring, all right? And you have your minor chords. So somebody stuck in this B, which would denote or imply a B diminished chord. In other words, they were suggesting that this might be a diminished ring. But that's as far as they got. And the placement of this B diminished, this placement is contrived. It's contrived. They stuck it in because they wanted it to look neat. Oh, look, everything's neat, you see? So they stuck it in there, and it's contrived. And what happens is, I have this diatonic scale. These tones generally represent your diatonic scale. So you take your diatonic scale, you take the tones, and out of that scale, you get your diatonic chords. All right? So once again, they list their diatonic chords here as major and here as minor, and then they stuck in this B, as I said, arbitrarily. It's kind of contrived. It's stuck in there because it's in the middle. It's nice and neat. So I think you understand what I'm saying about that. That's about as far as they got. And on the internet, I checked thousands of different sites and images, and I don't see anything really, really profound or useful. I just don't see it. So I thought, well, how are we going to dig in? And how are we going to change it and find something meaningful? I thought, well, just like with my book is all about a new perspective. It's just a new way of looking at stuff. It's just a different way of looking at stuff. So I thought, well, let's have a new perspective, and we're going to use that perspective specifically on the circle of fifths. All right? So what did I draw on? Now you've seen my previous videos, and you know what I keep harping on. The harmonic series, which I love. So our perspective is going to take into consideration physics, okay? And that entails the harmonic series, and I stress repeatedly the importance of the interval of the minor third and the interval of the augmented four. I've talked about that. You can see my previous videos, and you'll see. And then also, I have to consider space, the concept of space. Openness, is something open or closed? Is there expansion or contraction? What's happening? You know, are we growing, going out, or are we getting smaller and going in? And then another concept here is psychology. This is very important for when I tackle this circle of fifths problem. Psychologically, you have individuation, and then you have unity. I'm going through this process because I'm basically a follower, disciple of Carl Jung. This is Carl Jung, right? And we have to consider the part and the whole, all right? So I took into account physics, the concept of space, and the sense of Immanuel Kant or Schopenhauer, the way they think of space. Space for them is just a tool for thinking. It's not a real thing. Like space, time, and causality are just three things that the mind needs, or the mind can't work without them. The mind can't make sense of anything without space, time, and causality. So that's the space I'm talking about, all right? Now, then psychologically, I use Carl Jung's ideas to help me, all right? And then you say, well, what did we get? Well, the harmonic series, as you already know, and you get tired of hearing it, but the minor third interval in one octave alone is featured twice. Okay? You have a minor third interval. This is hard to do with this tiny phone. And here's a minor third interval. So it is featured twice consecutively. And this has helped me with many ideas. This little thing has helped me with many ideas, so I'm sticking with it. If it worked before, why not use it again? Then you have a concept of openness and closedness. Well, look at your chords. Here's some simple, you would call them triads. I call them fifth chords in my system, but let's say they're triads. See, here you have an augmented chord, and this chord is spread open as far as it can go. So we call it augmented. That's my symbol. And here's a major chord. You're familiar with this. And this, of course, would be an F major, because I always use my own clef. It's the same as the G clef, same thing. All right? This indicates that any note written on this in this space would be a C5, because it's a C clef. All right? So anyway, so then you have your minor chord, which tightens up a little bit. You see you had your major, and it tightened up a little bit. And then you have your diminished, and it's as tight as it can go. So you have a sense of openness here with your augmented, and you move in a direction to closedness. All right? And that's a very important concept. That's an important concept because we have to keep that in mind when we switch back to the circle of fifths. Because it's a circle, but not only that, it's a circle with concentric rings, all right? And each ring gets smaller. And so at least psychologically, all right, or in the sense of space, your sense of openness is here, and it goes in a direction towards closedness, all right, toward the center. Basically, toward the center of the galaxy, the black hole. That's where you're going, all right? So we have to keep those concepts in mind. And regarding that third perspective, that psychology, I refer again to Carl Jung. I have 21 books written by Carl or written about Carl. my intellectual academic hero? Well, Carl and, of course, Arthur Schopenhauer. And Carl studied probably more than anyone, and he drew hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these called mandala. The mandala. Okay, and let me just read this. The mandala is a projection of an unconscious collective attempt at the formation of a compensatory unified personality. Okay, you can read that there. You might not understand it, but you can read it. And what I did was, in my mind, to help me with my study of the circle of fifths, I just took out the word personality and put in system. System. I just exchanged words. Okay? And what I'm saying is, if this is a mandala, right, then it needs work. It shows you, it's visually, you can see by just looking at it, that in the mandala sense, it needs work. And then in the mandala, it's divided into four pieces, and that's called a quaternity, all right? Okay, a union of four. It's called a quaternity. So we're going to keep these things in mind when we work on the circle of fifths. I just showed you that hardly any development took place over 300 plus years with the circle of fifths. Hardly any development. It's unbelievable. How can that be? So when we look at the circle of fifths, we actually look at it. All right, we look at it. You can pause your video if you really want to look at it. In fact, I challenge you to look at it. I say, what do you see? What do you see? Well, circle of fifths. What do we see? What do we see? Okay? Well, we see very little data. There's hardly anything on here. And this is big. These are big. In fact, the minor symbols put in here, but ordinarily you'll just see like an A. And the A, of course, would represent your relative minor of C. But there's really not much there. Very little data. And then what do we see? Well, it's a pie chart with slices, and it's also a donut chart. All right? A donut chart is a subset, basically, of a pie chart, and we have only two concentric data rings. All right? 2 data rings. So we have that donut pie chart with only 2 concentric data rings. All right? Number 2. And then what else do we see? Well, we see openness because it's simple with very little data, but we also see this big thing in the middle here, empty space. Well, as we know, with our cell phones and our remote controls and our TVs and all that, that space is not empty. It's filled with data. It's filled with thoughts. There's no such thing as empty anything. So you see, we have, as it stands, the present day circle of fifths, all right, has very little data. It has only 2 data rings, all right, and there's this great sense of something missing. There's openness and there's space. That's a sense of incompleteness, you would think. All right, now, over the many years, as you know, I have failed many times. Many times. I could be failing now. But when I fail, I get ideas. I still get ideas. All right? But sometimes those ideas, they lead to another failure. All right? But sometimes those ideas lead to a success where I develop a system or devices. In fact, let me see. Up to this point, you probably get tired of seeing it, but I actually have systems. I show you my systems. I did videos on these. I don't know if anybody's using them, but I have systems. And then I have devices here. I have devices, okay. Let me just show you that. They're devices. Anyway, you've seen that before. So I thought, well, I'd like to take this plain ordinary circle of fifths and see what I can do. And I did something, and I just go ahead and tell you, because we're going too long. I call it the amplified circle of fifths. And I put a copyright date on here, but you know me. I don't remember what day, what month. I'm pretty sure it was 98 when I got as far as I got, but I don't know. I just put that on there because if somebody wants to publish what I'm telling you in these next few videos, that's fine, but at least contact me and let me know, because anybody who knows me knows that I've had these ideas for decades. So the point is, my next video is going to talk about the amplified circle of fifths, and we'll see if it's of any value, okay? So thanks for being patient. I know that went long. I'll come back, right back, and we'll dig in. Good night.